What's up, guys? Dontavious Hill here, three-time Team USA high jumper, five-time NCAA All-American, and currently ranked number 28th in the world in the high jump right now. And I've coached hundreds of high school high jumpers to achieve personal best, qualify or win state championships, and also eventually get to the collegiate level. And today, what we're going to be talking about is the fact that 90% of the high jump is approach focused, right? And what the benefits of actually focusing on your approach in the high jump versus thinking so much over the bar will do for you in the sport, right? And take it from me, right? So when I was a freshman, I was jumping 4'8". Today, my personal best is 7 feet 5 inches, and we'll be improving from that point. So I pretty much improved almost a full 3 feet in the sport since my first day doing it, right? So take it from me, right? So when you think about the high jump, one of the main problems is most people think high jump and they're only thinking about the jumping part when you're actually over the bar. And that has got to be, the biggest issue in the sport, especially when it comes to our early developing young athletes who are now just not getting into the sport. And the problem is when all you think about is going over the bar, it stops you from thinking about the part that's more important, right? Which is the entire approach, right? But what usually happens is we have athletes who think only about going over the bar. And these are usually the thoughts that go into their head when they're only thinking about going over the bar, which is the 10%, right? So when they're only thinking about going over the bar, most times they're thinking arch. They're thinking arch, or they're thinking, what's the word, right? They're just, usually that's the main thing they're thinking. Arch or hips up, right? And when you think arch in the high jump, thinking arch does nothing for you. It gets you to bend your back, but bending your back does not even get your hips to become the highest point. So not only do you have an athlete who's thinking arch because all they think about is the jumping part, they're also thinking hips up. And neither one of these things can happen on their own. Neither one. So how do you actually arch, or how do you actually get your hips up? Well, let's just go ahead and say this. Well, number one, you don't really need to arch to jump really high bars. There doesn't really have to be any arch at all, right? And if you ever want to get your hips up, which is basically getting your hips to the highest point, that happens based off of all the work that you do on the ground, right? So we want to kind of just get out of this concept of thinking, if I just arch my back good enough, I'll be able to clear this bar. And we really want to change our mind to thinking something completely different. We want to think, if I approach this bar good enough, it's going to throw me in position to clear this bar. That's how we want to think about it. A good way to think about it, right? If you guys have ever seen one of those little wind up timers, or like a slinky or something that you can kind of twist really hard and it'll recoil back, right? Having some recoil. That's kind of how the high jump is, right? So in the high jump, when you come through this approach, right? We have our bar here. When you come through this approach, this is you building up and getting ready to turn that recoil on, right? This is us getting ready we're twisting that knob. And from the point of takeoff, that's when all of that power, all of that force that you put into that rotation, that's when that throws you into that rotation and like ignites all that recoil that you just built up. And when you do that, that's what's going to put us in position to clear a bar, right? So, let's draw us an imaginary bar here. We're actually going to race. And think about recoil and what it does, right? In the approach, let's say we take 10 steps. All of this is what's going to determine us getting this over a bar, okay? All of this, right? So when you think about the high jump, the main reason why we do not want to be in this mind frame of whenever I'm looking at my film or whenever I'm looking at this, I just need to arch my back more, I need to get my hips up, or I'm looking at this, and we don't want to be in that frame, because if we just only focus on the 10%, you can only expect yourself to be focusing on 10% of what you actually need to do to get better. But when we change our mind and we start to think, let's focus on the 90%, let's focus on everything else that's actually going to help me improve in the sport. This is where you can make leaps and bounds in the sport. From pushing out the back right here, boom. From maintaining through the curve, boom, right? And then there's so many other things that go into pushing out the back and maintaining through the curve that you guys can watch on this channel right now, right? So when you talking about pushing out the back, you got how much force you're applying to the ground when you get into the curve, right? You got how much lean. Are you actually even leaning away from the bar in the curve, right? As you can see, there are so many different bits and pieces that go into the 90% that's going to affect the 10% over the bar, right? So as a high jumper, as an athlete, as a parent, as a coach, let's get our athletes to focus on how can they be better here? How much better can we run? How much more force can we apply to the ground? How much better can we lean? Let's think about all those different things in the concept of the high jump to actually get us over the bar. Let's not start here. The only people who can technically kind of start here or see here is if you already know what's happening in your approach. These are seasoned jumpers can kind of look here in the video and kind of say, okay, this is where I was in my approach, this is where I am, and whatnot, right? But other jumpers, most people and most young high jumpers, and if you're just getting critiquing and just trying to see like where you're going, you gotta start at the beginning. You gotta start here. You got to. Look at what's happening right here. It's gonna tell you everything you need to know, right? Since I've been doing high jump for 11 years, I know that my approach almost looks the same every time I run it. Every time. So if I'm at a meet or something, sometimes I can just look at the end of the video and just see, okay, what was happening at takeoff? What can I do better at takeoff? Because I know I got the same run every time. But for many young athletes, their run looks different every time they run. Every time they approach the bar, the run looks different. So this is where you got to put your focus at, right here in the approach, because it's 90%. And that's exactly what I teach my athletes inside of my program, right? So the way my program works is we identify where your athlete needs the most help at, right? And if it was in reference to the approach, right? Let's say your athlete was struggling with leaning in the curve. They struggle with lean. They struggle with their takeoff. And let's say they struggle with actually pushing out the back in the beginning. So we'll put that first, right? So what happens is when we help my athletes and they focus on each one of these things in the high jump, you can get an inch or so from getting a little bit better at each one of these things, right? So let's just say we got an inch for all of these, and we're dealing with a high jumper who's jumped 6'6", right? So he's got an inch here, and an inch here. So he's went from 6'6" to 6'9", right? And one thing I tell my athletes and my parents that work with me is your child does not have to be perfect. They do not have to just be evenly balanced and get better everywhere, even though we're going to attack every area. If your child just wasn't good at taking off, he wasn't good at leaning, but he learned to master being able to push out the back, and we were able to get him another 3 inches in this category alone, he would still go from 6'6" to 6'9", right? Or in the girls' case, they would go from 5 feet to 5'3". They were a 5-foot jumper, right? So this is how my system works. It allows us to attack where your athlete needs the most help at and actually help them improve in the sport to get them the results that they want, right? So if you're the parent of a high school high jumper who wants to jump personal best in the sport, or who wants to eventually qualify or win a state championship, then book a call with me down below and we'll walk through where your athlete is right now in their high jump journey, where they want to get to, and I'll walk you guys through my entire coaching process of how we actually help families improve in the high jump. And if you're an athlete, watch this video. Definitely get this video to your parents, have them watch it with you, and book a call with me down below so we can get you guys on a call and get you guys the high jump help that you need.